Tonight, we have Aaron Seager as our speaker, and he is a ranger with the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields. He was a law enforcement officer for 15 years. In 2020, he graduated from Liberty University with a degree in history and criminal justice. He has a YouTube channel called Aaron's Civil War Trials. He is employed with the Shenandoah Valley Battlefield Foundation. He lives in Newmarket with his wife and son, and he is very knowledgeable about the Civil War.
Hello, everybody. So again, my name is Aaron Seager. I am a park ranger with the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation. What my primary job there is, I'm the resource management park ranger, so I have the fun job. Everybody else has to be in the office and stuff. I get to be out in the fields, on the fields, building trails, fences. Sometimes there's a lot of cussing that goes on because things don't go right. But I still don't have to be stuck in the office. Come on. So I do that in my, I have a couple seats up here. In my spare time, I had started a YouTube channel, Aaron Civil War Trials. I actually started that back in 2004. The channel didn't come until later, but it's just where I go around to different Civil War sites. A lot of them are little to hardly known sites, so I try to bring light to those because you can walk over anything and not realize it's historic. So that's a little bit about me. What better day to be able to talk about the Battle of Front Royal than on the anniversary of the Battle of Front Royal. May 23rd, 1862. So a lot that's been happening. I think we kind of get lost, and this battle gets lost in the overall picture of the bigger battles that happened. But this is a strategically important battle that happens here in the Shenandoah Valley. But I want to back up just a little bit to show you how we get to where we're at in Front Royal. We have, everybody here probably knows Stonewall Jackson. If you don't, there's plenty, I'm sure, to figure him out. Jackson has been placed in command in 1861, in November of 1861, into October, beginning of November, of the Valley District. Now this is after Manassas, where he's got his moniker and the Stonewall Brigade and everything. But Jackson, when he's placed in command here, he doesn't have a large army in the valley. But he's going to start making movements. By December, he is going to attack Dam Number 5, which is up near the West Virginia-Maryland border. That attack's not going to go well. It's going to actually not work at all. Jackson, and we'll find this out later, most of Jackson's battles are fought on Sundays. This one happens to be on a Sunday as well, but unlike some of the others, this one apparently was not under divine providence, so that's why it didn't work. So he will not be able to really damage Dam Number 5 very much, but he's showing his aggressiveness right away. Right after that, we'll have the Romney campaign. He'll march out of Winchester and go to Romney, and that's going to be not a very fun march for his men. He's going to have some guys under a guy named Loring who are not going to be happy with him. This is going to cause Jackson to almost resign from his command, as he's going to be told to bring Loring's troops back from Romney. That's not really super successful either. However, again, we're seeing this aggressiveness that the Southern commander has, where if you're looking, especially in 1862, at some of the other movements that are going on, the Union is being more aggressive at this point. We've got McClellan, even though he's slow, he's now moving down to the peninsula. And he's going to start his drive up the peninsula toward the Confederate capital of Richmond. So we'll fast forward to March of 1862. Here's our boy Jackson again, Kernstown. He's going to attack a force that is larger than him. He doesn't know it's larger than him to begin with, but he's going to attack that force, and he is going to really put up a heck of a fight there. It will not be till his troops run out of ammunition that they are pulled back. He will be upset with one of his subordinates about that, Richard Garnett. He'll be upset with him about that, but that's a whole nother topic. But he will lose that battle. It will be the only battle here in the Shenandoah Valley that he actually loses. but it's a strategic victory. And a lot of times especially, I don't know how many of you played sports, but in sports, you always get that it was a moral victory, and we hated that because it's like, when we got beat 52-0. It's not a moral victory, we got spanked. This is actually a good moral victory for Jackson because, again, he's showing his aggressiveness. At this time, there's not a lot of aggressiveness in the South, save for a battle out west at Pea Ridge. You don't have the thrust that the Union Army is making at this point. And Jackson doing that is going to kind of have everything pause. Now there's this conception that Abraham Lincoln gets really scared about Stonewall Jackson. I don't really believe that it was Lincoln. Lincoln's a pretty smart guy. I think he knows what Jackson's up to, the way it sounds, the way you kind of read his stuff. There's another guy named Edwin Stanton, who is now the Secretary of War, and he is very, I won't want to say crazy, but I think his emotions are out, they're everywhere. And so he gets frantic and believing that Jackson's going to come in the night and steal the whole Capitol, and that's going to work on Lincoln. If I've got somebody in my ear telling me this stuff all the time, you're going to finally start to believe it a little bit. So what Jackson's doing is working. A little bit later, we'll have where Joseph Johnston has moved the Army of Northern Virginia down to the peninsula to face George McClellan as they're coming up the peninsula toward Richmond. In the meantime, Jackson's looking for another way to start doing things. He's going to be in contact with a guy that we all know, Robert E. Lee, who is the military advisor at this time in the Confederacy. And Lee is going to tell him, do what you need to do. I think if you make an attack, you should attack General Nathaniel P. Banks, who is in Winchester, not far from where we're at right now. Banks will move down the valley to Harrisonburg and be in close proximity to Jackson. But Jackson decides, he's talked with another guy named Allegheny Johnson, Edward Allegheny Johnson. He's talked to him about this army that's out in the west over in Highland County, and Johnson doesn't have a whole lot of men. He's got about 2,500, but he knows if he can get with Jackson, maybe they can swoop in and attack this force, then turn around together and fight Banks. He's also got a guy named Richard Ewell, who is just on the other side of the mountain, on the eastern side, but he's within proximity of Jackson. Jackson will be in contact with him. So late April, Jackson's going to move out from the town of Conrad's Store, now present day Elkton, and he'll start, as he's moving out, right at the mouth of the Luray Valley, Ewell's going to take over his camps. It'll still be, basically it'll look like Jackson never left because it'll be so simultaneous. The problem is poor old Ewell doesn't really know where Jackson's going, he just knows he's going to the mountains. Jackson will then go over, meet up with Allegheny Johnson, and there will be a battle at the Battle of McDowell in Highland County. It'll be the first Confederate victory of the Shenandoah Valley campaign. They do suffer heavy losses there, but this victory will enable Jackson to push those western troops back all the way to Franklin, present-day West Virginia. Now, once he comes back into the valley, he's still worried about this guy Banks because he's getting rumors that Banks is coming in his rear. Banks has now moved back toward Winchester. He's up at Strasburg, actually, so about 12 miles west of us. When Jackson gets back in the valley, he's going to link up with Ewell. His army has now blossomed to about 14,000. He's going to have about 48 cannons with him. So he's got to do some reorganization, but he's got a lot of good troops. In the meantime, Ewell and Jackson are starting to try to figure out what's going on. Ewell at first was upset with Jackson. When Jackson's out in McDowell, he's like, he's off in the mountains, he's a fool, I don't know what he's doing. By the end of this battle and the Battle of First Winchester, Ewell will be like, Jackson's a genius, he's great. So we go from thinking he's a fool to he's a genius. Part of that is because Jackson doesn't discuss anything with anybody. He's had one council of war, it didn't work out well, so he just didn't have any more of them. Not necessarily a bad thing. It worked in his favor at least. So as Jackson links up with Ewell, Now they're going to start marching down the Shenandoah Valley, and he's got an option. Should he go up to Strasburg and attack Nathaniel P. Banks, who's got a pretty good army there, he's pretty defensible there, or is there another attack he can make? He's going to find out there is another attack he can make, and that attack is going to be here at Front Royal. There's a small force under Colonel Kinley, who's here in Front Royal, and his force is less than 1,000 men. He is going to have some men out at Buckton is it Depot or Station? I think it's Station. He'll have some men out there, but he's going to be spread thin. He actually does not have cavalry to begin with, and so when he does his pickets, it'll be the 1st Maryland Infantry, U.S., that will be out about 1.5 miles south of us that will be doing picket duty. So he can't go down the roads with a cavalry patrol and figure out what's coming at him. So Jackson's going to make that decision to go into the Luray Valley. It's kind of a split decision. It's not like it took a long time. He just says, you know what, this is where we're going. He'll go into the Luray Valley, and just so you know, that's across the Massanutten Mountains. Massanutten splits the Shenandoah Valley, so you have the Luray or Page Valley and then the Shenandoah Valley proper. But they'll cross at New Market, they're at the New Market Gap, and they'll continue down, they'll cross White Bridge, or White House Bridge. If you go to there today, that is not the original bridge, but there is the original White House still sitting out there. So all these troops, Union and Confederate, pass by that, which is pretty neat to see. But as they're going across there, this decision kind of comes because that bridge was supposed to have been burned, but it wasn't. Unfortunately, Colonel Turner Ashby, who becomes general, his troops failed to burn some of the bridges. There could have been some Applejack involved. We don't know for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, they were drunk. So discipline is lacking a little bit, but this will be actually, Ashby will have the cavalry taken away from him a little bit, and Jackson will pull back after Ashby decides he's going to resign. One of the few times that happens, where Jackson's like, okay, I don't want you, doesn't want him to go. The guys listen to Ashby. So anyway, he's moving toward Front Royal. As he's approaching, his troops are moving pretty quickly. They will actually not be far from here by May 22nd. On the 23rd, Jackson's going to delay a little bit. Now, at the rear of his column is going to be the 1st Maryland Confederates. They're in mutiny. They're upset. They didn't sign up for the whole war. Some of the companies had been sent home. They were bamboozled. They were tricked. This is not okay. I don't want to be here. Jackson doesn't know that. He's at the front of the line, and apparently it's almost a 5-hour walk because it takes 5 hours for the Marylanders to get up front eventually. But Jackson's going to send an order back that he wants the 1st Maryland to push through. And the Army will go to the side and let them pass, and they will be the front, the attacking force at the Battle of Front Royal. Now, part of that, I think there's a couple little things that happen with that. Number one, he's waiting for Jedediah Hotchkiss, who is his map maker, but he's kind of a jack of all trades. The guy's led cavalry raids. He's been out, ambushing people and stuff. He's burned bridges, and he makes maps. And he was not a professional map maker to begin with, but he does a very good job. We're lucky historically to have his maps, even the small ones. But there's a huge valley map that he made. But we're lucky to have those still in possession of Americans. They weren't burned or anything like that. We still have them. So he's waiting on Hotchkiss because while Jackson has made it up here, he doesn't really know the road network around him. He's not sure what's to the north of him or the east or the west. He knows he's on the Browntown Road, the Front Royal Road. It's a macadamized road. It's a good road. What's out here? What can I maneuver around? Now, he's got a guy under Ashby, and I'm trying to remember his name. I think it's Buckton.
Simpson.
There's a...
Simpson.
Is that the scout from Ashby?
Uh-huh.
Okay, he is going to come out and They're going to be out.
Samuel Simpson.
Samuel Simpson. They are going to come out, and he's going to actually go through those Maryland pickets. Now, seems like it should be a hard thing to do. The pickets have been on duty before. They've been out there before, and one of the officers had ridden by them at a different time and said, they're kind of lazy. Half of them were sleeping. There's equipment over here. Some of them are fishing. They're taking baths. They're not really doing what they're supposed to be doing. Probably kind of the same thing they're doing on May 23rd of 1862, as this scout's going to ride in, and he's going to be able to, he's familiar with Front Royal. He grew up in the area. His uncle has a house here, so he knows Front Royal. He's able to come in, get the dispositions of the Union Army and what troops are here, and he's going to be pretty accurate. He's going to miss one parrot gun. They have two. He's going to miss one of those, and he's going to misidentify one infantry company as cavalry.
Buck.
Buck, yes, Buck.
Yes.
Yep, that's the one I'm thinking of, Buck.
William Buck.
William Buck, yep. And so he's going to, but other than that, he's pretty accurate. So when he gets back, he's going to tell Ashby this. Now, we don't know what time Ashby gets it, but we do know that Stonewall Jackson will have that information by 7:30 in the morning, May 23rd. His troops have already started marching at first light. They got ready, and by 5 o'clock, they were on the road and marching to Front Royal. So Jackson knowing this information is a great thing. As he's approaching Front Royal, getting ready, getting his dispositions ready and calling for the 1st Maryland to come up, there's going to be a young lady that comes running across the fields, and many of you know her, Belle Boyd. Now, she is not going to give Jackson any information he does not already have. However, so does she impact the battle? Not really. But I still think her bravery's got to be pointed out, because I'm in a town full of Union troops, the enemy, and I'm going to run across these fields in hopes that I can catch the Confederates just quick enough to tell them what they're facing. Even though they already know, she doesn't know the thing. So she comes up, and there's several different stories that happen. One is Richard Taylor says he saw her, but he was 3 miles away. He was even nearer. But there's several stories about her coming up, and in the end, what really happens is she gives the information. Jackson gets that information. It confirms what he knows. So it's a confirmation. He's been able to get that from Ashby's scout. He's been able to get that from prisoners that have been captured of the 1st Maryland. So he's very well aware of what's facing him now. The biggest problem I have with it is he's waiting that 5 hours for the 1st Maryland to march all the way up. It takes a lot of time. And then these guys are going to be deployed into battle. Now, before we get to that, I want to read what, we talked about them being in mutiny, right? So let's see if I can find the right paper here. Bradley T. Johnson, he's in command of these Marylanders. And he is tasked with getting these guys to move. And he employs his best leadership skills to unite the regiment again. In an inspiring speech, Johnson will denounce his men for their dereliction. And here's what he says. "You have heard the personal order from General Jackson, and you are in a pretty condition to obey it. You are the sole hope of Maryland. You carry with you her honor and her pride. Shame on you, shame on you. I shall return this order to General Jackson with the endorsement, the 1st Maryland refuses to face the enemy. For I will not trust the honor of the glorious old state to discontented, dissatisfied men. I won't lead men who have no heart. Every man who is discontented must fall out of ranks, step to the rear, and march with the guard. If I can get 10 good men, I'll take the Maryland colors with them and will stand for home and honor. But never again call yourselves Marylanders. No Marylander ever threw down his arms and deserted his colors in the presence of the enemy. And those arms and those colors given you by a woman. Go." Now, I don't know what the woman part really has to do. I guess he was impassioned, he was going. But it works. You have this order from Jackson. They're going to find out eventually that they're going to be facing their counterparts, the 1st Maryland U.S. And then you've got their commander, he's fed up, he's done. You guys you guys are cowards. Especially we know in the 1860s, sir, if I looked at you and said, you're a coward, you're yellow. You're either going to have a duel with me or you're going to say, no, let me show you what I can do. One of those two. And that's what happens. Obviously, they don't have a duel, but these guys they got to show what they can do. So they're going to march to the front of the line. When they get there, they're going to be ordered to attack. They're going to find out that they're facing the 1st Maryland U.S. They will be also accompanied by Wheat's Battalion, Louisiana Tigers. These guys, these are some of my favorite people in the Civil War because they're just crazy. And one of my favorite guys, and I printed out a picture, but it was really blurry, so I'm going to use this one. Chatham Robideau Wheat. This guy is massive. And he actually has I believe he's a captain, Peck, who is also just a massive man. This unit has 2 big men. But Wheat is about 6'4". It says 280. I'm going to say probably closer to 300. But he is a big man. And the men that he is commanding are ruffians. They're cutthroats. They're dock workers. And I'm going to read you something that happens to one of the guys here. Once the Maryland or the Louisianians get a hold of him. But Wheat is he is the type of man you need to control these guys. They kind of had that either go to jail or go to the army look about them. So many of them went to the army to get to kill for free, and not get in trouble for it. So I mean, that seems like a pretty easy scenario to go there. But they're going to be accompanying the 1st Maryland. Here we go. So the Tigers, when they are going to come in, they're going to start capturing these pickets. One of the pickets that they capture is a guy named Captain Robert W. Reynolds. He's the head of Company F, guarding the town. Now, when these Tigers come across, they've got their Bowie knives out, big old knife, and they're shooting and doing whatever they want. A lot of them they're stabbing. Mr. Taylor here is not going to, or Reynolds, I'm sorry, Captain Reynolds here is not going to get stabbed by the Bowie knife. I would say sometimes that might be lucky, but guys, especially us men, I want you to listen to what happens to him. They're going to pummel him, punching him in the back and the testicles. I'd have rather been stabbed with a darn knife, all right? Because at least I know that pain, I'm going to be in shock from that. The other pain is not going to go away right away. So they are, ruffians. He will surrender his company by 2:15 p.m., which will allow, and I'm sorry, this was the first unit they come across. This will, in 15 minutes, the Confederates, after that first initial attack, are going to take the town of Front Royal. But the battle's not over. Kenly has been able to pull his men back to Richardson's Hill. They have a really good defensive position there. He is looking at his retreat. If he were to have to retreat, what's he got to do? He's got to cross 2 rivers. Well, it's really 1 river, but 2 forks of a river. The north and south fork of the Shenandoah, he's got to get across those. One of those will be an easy way to get across. It's not real deep. The other one is pretty deep, and there's a wagon bridge. And that's where his men will end up crossing. But his defensive position is pretty good. He is able to stop the Confederate thrust of the Marylanders and those Tigers. And part of that is the Marylanders are wore out. Yes, they were at the back of the line. They moved 5 hours up. As soon as they got to the front, they had to go and attack. They just fought a skirmish and a battle. They're pretty wore out by this time. And the Tigers, although they didn't have to go, on that long march, they're pretty tired too, because they're a little bit crazy, so they probably used all their energy with the rebel yell and everything else and stabbing and things like that. So they're a little worn out. They're also kind of equal numbers. Jackson has not brought up other infantry to assist them, so it looks. What has happened is Richard Taylor, who is in command of the Louisianians overall, the rest of those Louisiana troops have moved off, and they're kind of gone off to the right. They end up being gone for 2 hours. Who knows where they're at? They're just lost. It'll be quite a while. It'll be 2 hours before they show up and finally come in onto the Federals to kind of bolster the numbers. At that same time, the cavalry, Turner Ashby's cavalry, has been up at Buckton Station, and they attacked there. They weren't able to actually dislodge the Federals there. And then you got Thomas Flournoy. He is going to be coming in. Kinley is going to see Flournoy coming into Front Royal. Just him coming in is enough of a threat because he is on the flank of the Federals. That is going to break that Federal line. At that same time, that's when these other Louisianians start coming in, and they're going to start pressing that line. They're going to push the Federals off of Richardson's Hill, and across the river these guys go. Now, they're not going to just give up. The Federals here, I got to give them credit, they're pretty stout for such a small force here in Front Royal, and considering they're not getting any backup. They're a pretty stout group to have to deal with. But it's a little too late for them, you know. They don't have enough men. As they're pushed back, they're trying to figure out, they want to get to a place called Cedarville. If they can get to Cedarville, then maybe they can make it that 12 miles to Strasburg and hook up with the rest of Banks's army. The problem is the cavalry is on them. Not going to allow them to do it. And they're going to suffer some pretty good casualties. A lot of these guys, how they even end up surviving is pretty intense. Kinley will actually take a severe cut to the head. He'll be put in the back of an ambulance, and he's going to be shot at point blank by a rebel trooper. The problem is somehow that guy misses. I don't know how he missed, but he missed. And Kinley will be whisked away, but he'll be whisked away by Confederates and go to a prison camp. Some of his other men are going to take several shots, saber shots to the head, and still survive. That's just, I know a guy that I worked with that actually got a saber shot to the head when I was a police officer, and survived, and it was very gruesome, so I can't imagine more than one getting hit. But they're going to have that happen. The cavalry is initially not going to be able to push Kinley any farther. They will, before Kinley's injured, they will make up a nice defensive line at Fairfield, just north of town, and that'll be the final Federal line. When they make up that line there, the cavalry's going to charge into them and not be able to break that line to start. As they regroup, that's when the line's going to break. The reason is, they weren't able to take those 150 men up the road, but those guys were panicked. These guys have just run off a hill, run across two forks of a river, and are now trying to get the heck out of Dodge. They're panicked. So as the cavalry reforms again to charge them, they're going to break. And that's when, for the lack of a better term, for the Union, that's when all hell breaks loose. And Kinley and the rest of them will be captured or killed. By 7 o'clock in the evening, the battle's over. The Marylanders, got their glory back. They went down and they attacked the 1st Maryland U.S. and, were able to bolster it bolstered them even more, their elan, to be able to attack their home folk, or neighbors that they disagreed with. But most of the troops are going to be captured, and adds insult to injury. There's going to be about $300,000 worth of government equipment that's going to be taken here in Front Royal. And this is going to make Banks's position in Strasburg untenable. Jackson's on his flank now. Banks has got to move. Jackson, unfortunately, because of the late hour, will not be able to move anymore on May 23rd. He will have to wait till the next day to start his movement toward Middletown. Then we'll have the Battle of First Winchester on May 25th. But this is a big victory. It might not be the best battle that Jackson's fought as far as the time goes, but I think if you put that into context, this is the first time all these elements of his army have worked together. He's fought Kernstown, that was just him, and Ashby. We fight McDowell, it's him and Johnson. Now we have Johnston, Ewell, and Jackson all together. And that Valley Force that we're going to see just a couple days later at Winchester is going to be quite formidable here in the Shenandoah Valley and cause a lot of troops to be diverted from Richmond back here to the valley. It shows how important the Shenandoah Valley really is. One thing I did want to read, it has to do about Fairview, is it became a hospital. You know, as most places do after a battle, we kind of forget about the citizens and things like that. You know, the armies move on, but the citizens are still here. They still have to take care of all the dead and the wounded and things like this. And Fairview is one of the McKay House. McKay Home is one of those places where the wounded were. But I always like this story. A good friend of mine, Drew Gruber, made sure it was on the Civil War Trail sign. So it says, many of the wounded soldiers were cared for at the McKay House, where blood stained the floors for years. Dabney Eastham of Company B, 6th Virginia Cavalry, was believed to be mortally wounded and was left lying in the yard. The next morning, when his father arrived from Rappahannock County to claim his son's body, he found that the grass and mud had clotted the wound. To avoid opening that wound, because this saved his life, they not only pick him up, but they pick up the sod around him and carry him in. He's going to survive that. That's pretty crazy. You know, I don't know many people who could say, well, yeah, mud and grass, that's what saved me, you know. Maybe we should reevaluate how we do our medical stuff. I don't know. But he's going to survive that, which I think is it just goes to show you just the different things why the American Civil War is so interesting. Not just the battles, but the little things like that come out, and you go, wow, okay. You know, I can tell you about a guy in Gettysburg who got his head shot off, and because rainwater fell on his brain, it ends up keeping the brain from swelling, and he'll go on to have a bunch of kids later on. And he's got like a little mesh thing over his head. Who knew? You know, but it's things like that that make this, you know, a very interesting war and a very interesting story in American history, and it keeps us interested. So, for any questions on the Battle of Front Royal, I don't know how far on time we went. I think we're probably close. Anybody has any questions or anything?
Bill Boyd's looking over your shoulder.
I know, she keeps staring at me. She's getting my good side. Now, she is interesting. I mean,
This
she's not the best spy.
is the case.
Oh, okay. Yep. There's Bradley T. Johnson, the 1st Maryland. So yeah, there's a wonderful case over here to be able to talk about that. And, yeah, Belle Boyd. You know, I think she's caught like 30 times. I think something like that. Not the best spy. No, she was not conspicuous compared to some of the others that are in the Union camps and things like that. She gets caught a lot, so she was not very good at that part, but she got some information out there, so that's all that matters. Any other questions or anything?
Jim Eason was the grandson of Dabney Eason.
Okay.
And he said, but for the rain.
Well, and it's just amazing. I mean, I still can't fathom in my mind mud and dirt. You know, we think about dirt getting in the wound, that's infectious. Well, that's what saved his life. So.